Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello everyone, I hope you're interested in cubes, or at least a commander cube, and I can do even better, a two-headed giant commander cube.
Wait a second, this is a dream. I'm dreaming!
If you're interested in one, I think I have a really sweet list for everyone. It's a medium-sized cube. It's 640 cards. Something I want to talk about that number is it just feels like maintenance is a lot easier. Once you get into larger cubes, it can be pretty daunting. You lose control over archetypes that you want in your cube the bigger it gets. If you don't mind devoting the time, then having a bigger cube ain't a bad deal. I personally don't have a whole lot of time on my hands, so having it being smaller is better for me. One of the benefits of having a larger cube is draft size. Say I had 8 people together that wanted to draft my cube. 8 times 20 is 160. You multiply that by 3, and then that's 480 cards per draft with 8 people. So in an ideal world, if you wanted to draft twice on one night with 8 people, you would actually want a cube that's 960 cards. The amount of times I've managed to pull off 8 people willing to play a cube, it's very rare. I think I've done it 3 times ever since I started. When I bring it with me to events, I bring it with me to my local game store. It's a rare thing because most Commander players, they've never played a limited format before. And that also influenced my design because I knew that about Commander. A lot of Commander players are very casual and that's all they play, and there's nothing wrong with that. And to usher people and have them perform decently well, I designed my cube in a way where anyone could draft this and have a good deck. I made the curve incredibly low. It's around 3, meaning it doesn't punish people who have bad habits at draft. It's literally impossible for you to draft all the very expensive cards 4 mana or greater because there's not that many of them. Most of them are really cheap. It lets you have a game from beginning to end. That's just to make it friendlier for people who don't have experience with drafting. They're already going to be overwhelmed because casual players don't have very large memory banks. I recognize and remember things based on picture. I have a photographic memory when it comes to Magic cards. I wish I could apply that to other things, but unfortunately I can't. And I don't actually need to read things when cards are being passed to me, versus a new player will have to look at 20 fresh new cards and be like, I don't know what to do.
I'm getting in my bag!
Expect drafting to be a lot longer. The drafting rules are very similar to that of when you drafted Commander Legends when those sets released. You have 20 card packs, you pick 2, and then you pass the rest of the pack, left or right. And you do that 3 times. You do that until the pack ends, and then you pick up a new pack and you restart the process until all the packs have been picked apart. If you're doing this with two-headed giant in mind, you have to have your teammates sit opposite of you. So in a table of 8, that means there are 3 seats between you and your partner. And then obviously the seats shrink the fewer players that are in your queue. And if you want more information about drafting this and rules, feel free to ask me and in the comments below, and I'll give you those details if I forget anything or you have something to ask outside of what I provide you in this video. Since it is a two-headed giant cube, I included a lot of unique synergies that you don't see in other people's cubes. Some of your best effects are targeting other player stuff, because then you could target your teammates. And a good example of that would be Garuk the Wild Speaker. It says untap 2 target lands. It doesn't specify whose lands. So if your teammate's in a pinch, you could untap their lands so they have more mana to play with on their turns to cast more spells or bigger spells. I also have cantripping spells. Allows you to target other players, like comparative analysis here. Now, another mechanic that is great in Two-Headed Giant is Surge. Cast it for its Surge cost if you or a teammate has cast another spell this turn, i.e. your opponent casts a spell first, and then you get to cast this for cheaper. There's other stuff in here like Assist. Your teammates can help you pay for things mana-wise. I made the removal equally as efficient as the creature packages. Reclusive Taxidermist is one of many examples. As the game goes on, if you have 4 more creature cards in your graveyard, he gets a stat boost. So he becomes a threat in the mid to late game. All the little bodies do that. Your removal will feel rare. It's a nice headbutting experience. If you want to play Magic like the old days, I think this cube produces those nostalgic feelings of everyone feels like they're playing on equal ground. In other terms of cube design, because it's a commander cube, you have to include very few pips because commanders lock you into a color combination. I don't want people to be struggling to draft non-basic lands, so I also made that an easy mode kind of thing for also new players. If you look at my list, either lands don't have pips on them at all, or they only have one pip, and that's just to make the land cards more flexible. It's a way for people to change their minds midway through the draft if they wish. That was a creative thought I had when designing this, especially in a commander cube. The only multicolored cards in the cube are legendary creatures that you could play as commanders. The reason why I did that is because I don't want people to be drafting useless cards. So like, if I filled this cube with a bunch of multicolored spells, they would only be useful to very specific types, and it's not a guarantee that people will draft those specific colors. And I basically picked out some of my top favorites that are fair. I didn't include any commander that protects itself, so no hexproof commanders, no indestructible shroud, no commanders that could return themselves from their graveyard easily.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
As you go down, the fewer the colors go. So I have triple color commanders, but there's only 3 in each because they should be more rare. And I didn't want the draft experience to be you draft 4 or more colors and then you just pick the best card from every pack. I wanted people to have at least some kind of limitation or have some kind of struggle or some skill in their drafting, a limiting factor for people who do know what they're doing. The only way you could possibly pull off 4 or more colors or 4 colors is with the partner commanders, but I included so few of them that it's really difficult to pull off. I included more in the monocolored variety that are partners than I did in the 2 colors. If you pull off 4 colors with the partners, you got lucky. You just managed to pull it off. Archetypes I have in this deck, one of them being Group Slug. When I play this cube, I remember things like performance-wise, and I remember what needs to be limited and what needs to be boosted. Group Slug in particular needed to be rebalanced because I was noticing that it was just way too effective. I had to take away a lot of the slug cards that dealt 2 or more damage, and I limited it to just 1. Because even with 1 trigger of Group Slug with 1 damage, that equates to 2. And if you could get multiple triggers off of a turn, you probably could end up killing people. Reanimator was also way too effective. Most games are pretty quick with my cube. They're anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes in length, which is pretty wild. The gameplay is like the shortest part. Normally we could get multiple rounds off gameplay-wise before people are like, all right, either we're done, we want to play regular commander, or we would like to draft again. And then in that case, you could fit probably 2 draft experiences in one night because of how great the gameplay is. It's nice and quick. But should the gameplay go long, the alternative win factors with Group Slug and Reanimator was pretty brutal. I was noticing if the games went beyond turns like 6 or 7, the Slug decks and the Reanimator decks, we were just crushing consistently. So I included more silver bullets, like Golgari got Namada in my recent update, and Misery Shadow. They exile things as creatures die. Other archetypes I included are +1/+1 counters, life gain, aggro, control, Voltron, and tokens. There we go. Those are all of them. But I've been thinking about if I were to increase the size of my cube, I would include more archetypes, like more popular themes like creatures. Maybe that would garner more interest in the cube. Everything is pretty well balanced in here right now. I don't know what that would do once I introduce 160 more cards, but I could do it. And it would definitely be devoted to just including more themes. And if I were to do that, I'd probably just pick out like the typical tribes in these colors. Like green would get elves, red would get goblins, white would get humans, blue would get merfolk, and then black, zombies.
I can fix you up with a menagerie.
I think that's what I would do. And then add commanders in multicolors to fill those gaps. Commander is included in the packs. You don't get to just pick a commander before the game starts and draft after. I did that to add a layer of complexity. I get people suggesting that I should do that, where I shuffle a deck of commanders and people get a pick of 1 of 3 cards. There's not a whole lot of risk to doing that because then you're pigeonholed and what you play before the draft even starts. And I don't really like that. That kind of ruins the draft experience. They're not really learning. But when you draft a commander deck, it is a 60 card format. So you'll have one commander and 59 cards in your deck. And then you just play with anywhere from 23 to 27 lands like a normal 60 card deck based on how low your curve is and your strategy. Normally you want higher land counts for control, lower counts for when you're playing aggro. Lesson for all you commander players that are interested and don't have a lot of experience drafting. The color distribution's even, and then colorless cards are nice for bridging the gap when you don't have enough pieces. Plus, if you draft with a partner, you guys share your draft pools. So if you find yourself coming up too short, then you have cards to take from your partner and vice versa. But that rarely ever happens in general. People have very full decks and have more issues cutting and paring down than they do finding stuff to play with. Mono-colored decks are probably the hardest to generate because you're competing with multiple people, but obviously when the pods are smaller, you can do it pretty consistently. And then, like I said, you could rely on your partner to find that stuff. And communicating with your partner mid-draft is perfectly fine. You'd be like, keep the card face down, show them on the other side of the table, this is what I plan on doing. Keep a lookout for cards that would, fit nicely into here. And if you don't have anything to pick for yourself, then pick for me. That's what you tell your partner anyways. The reason why I wanted to update it recently was I had a buddy of mine reach out asking to get him a copy for his bachelor party.
Best I've ever seen.
And I was like, I haven't updated this in a while. It actually had been 2 years since I updated it, and that's because I haven't been playing this as much as I'd like, and my life's just been pretty crazy. So let's look at the history. August 7th of 2022 is the last time I touched this. So I had 16 sets to pick and pull from. It took me a little bit of time, but I'm pretty quick about making decisions. I don't treat cards with the utmost sanctity. Nothing's too sacred for me to cut or remove. Because I had 16 sets to update with, I changed, according to this, 158 cards of my 640 card list. That's a big change. That's close to a sixth of the list. So out of 16 sets, I probably picked and pulled close to 10 cards from each of them. So there's a good representation of every card in Magic in this cube. The beauty of picking and pulling cards like this is it's archived. I have these cards just put somewhere else and it saves what was already in here. So if I ever were to increase the count of my cube, I could always just look back at my history and be like, this wasn't so bad. I could put it back in. And having everything cataloged makes things a lot easier for upkeep. If you ever had an interest in making a cube or have in the past, just build it on Cube Cobra, which I'll also include in a link below. Doesn't cost any money to make an account, and just prune as the years go by. I hope you learned a lot about drafting. I hope you learned about creating a list of your own. Anyways, the gentleman who asked, I sent it to him for free, so call it a wedding present. I hope you enjoy. Take care now. Bye.